You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball, and other times, it just drops a grenade right in the middle of your perfectly planned Christmas dinner. And if you've ever had a parent use their will as a weapon, or felt like you were constantly fighting for a love that should have been freely given, then trust me, you're going to relate to this story because my dad, bless his controlling heart, decided that Christmas Eve was the perfect time to announce that only one of his daughters could be in his will. Yeah, you heard that right. Only one. So grab a mug of something warm, settle in, because this is the story of how my sister and I, instead of tearing each other apart, did something he never ever saw coming. And if you've ever had to deal with something similar, or battled for your place in your own family, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your experiences. It was Christmas Eve, always a big deal in our family, mostly because my dad, Arthur Vance, insisted it be a big deal. Our childhood home, a sprawling, meticulously maintained mansion on the outskirts of town, was usually draped in enough fairy lights to rival a small airport. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and my mother's famous gingerbread. But this year, a different kind of tension hung heavy, a metallic tang that overshadowed even the festive cheer. My mom, bless her gentle soul, had passed away 2 years prior, leaving a void that even Dad's insistence on tradition couldn't fill. And without her mediating presence, Dad's controlling tendencies had only intensified. There were just the three of us at the dinner table that night. Dad, me, Sarah, and my younger sister. Emily, David, my older brother, had wisely moved halfway across the country years ago, citing career opportunities, but really, I suspect, escaping Dad's gravitational pull. Sometimes, I envied him that escape. I'm Sarah, the elder daughter, the good daughter, as Dad liked to call me, usually with a proud, if somewhat possessive glint in his eye. I was the one who followed the rules, excelled in school, went to an Ivy League university, his choice, of course, and now, at 32, held a respectable, if utterly soul-crushing, position as a corporate lawyer in a prestigious downtown firm. My career was solid, my finances stable, but deep down, I often felt like a well-oiled machine, meticulously crafted to fulfill someone else's specifications. All I ever truly craved from my father was his unconditional love, a pat on the back that wasn't tied to an achievement or a specific path. But with Dad, everything always came with strings attached, especially money. Emily, on the other hand, was the wild child, the free spirit. At 29, she was a talented graphic designer, running her own small, quirky studio. She dyed her hair different colors, had tattoos, and openly challenged Dad's conservative views. Their relationship was a constant push and pull, a battle of wills. He disapproved of her career choice, her lifestyle, her every independent decision. He saw her as rebellious, ungrateful, a deviation from the perfect family portrait he envisioned. Yet, despite their clashes, I knew Emily secretly yearned for Dad's acceptance, too. She just expressed it through defiance, while I expressed it through compliance. Dinner started off stiffly, as it often did, without Mom's easy laughter to lighten the mood. We talked about inconsequential things: the weather, the dwindling stock market, the new car Dad was eyeing. Then, after the last bite of prime rib and before dessert was even served, Dad cleared his throat. It was the kind of theatrical clearing that always signaled an important, usually self-serving, announcement. He leaned back in his ornate dining chair, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Girls," he began, his voice booming slightly in the otherwise silent room, "I've been doing some thinking about the future, my legacy." My stomach tightened. Whenever Dad talked about his legacy, it usually meant someone was about to be put in their place, or a new, elaborate plan for control was about to be unveiled. He was a self-made man, a titan in the real estate development world, and his wealth was immense, but his money, more than just a source of comfort, was his primary tool of manipulation. Your mother, God rest her soul, always wanted you both to be taken care of, he continued, a wistful, almost mournful tone creeping into his voice, a tactic he used when he wanted to sound benevolent. And I intend to honor that. However, he paused, his gaze sweeping from me to Emily. I've also come to a decision regarding my will. A very important decision. Emily and I exchanged a wary glance. This didn't sound good. As you both know, Dad pressed on, ignoring our unspoken anxiety. The Vance name and the Vance fortune must be handled with care, with responsibility, and with respect for what I've built. He puffed out his chest, as if expecting a round of applause, and to ensure that, he stated, his voice now taking on a grave, formal tone. I've decided that only one of my daughters will be named in my will, the one who truly demonstrates she understands the value of responsibility, of loyalty, and of carrying on the family name properly. The words hung in the air, cold and shocking, like shards of ice. My blood ran cold. Emily gasped audibly across the table. What Emily finally managed, her voice a strained whisper. Dad, what are you talking about? Only one. Dad held up a hand, silencing her. It's simple, Emily. You both have choices to make in life. Choices about your careers, your partners, your priorities, and I, as the patriarch of this family, have the right to decide who is truly worthy of inheriting my life's work. It's a way to ensure my legacy continues in the right hands. So, what, Dad? I interjected, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and growing fury. Are we supposed to compete for it? Like some twisted reality show? He chuckled. A dry, humorless sound. Think of it as a challenge, an opportunity. You both have a year to show me who is truly committed to the family, to our values, to the kind of life I deem appropriate for a Vance heir. He didn't elaborate on the metrics for this challenge. Of course, it was deliberately vague, designed to keep us guessing, to keep us striving for his elusive approval. He knew our weak spots. He knew I craved his validation, and he knew Emily, despite her rebelliousness, still yearned for his acceptance. This wasn't about legacy. It was about control. It was about pitting us against each other, ensuring we remained locked in a desperate, lifelong competition for his affection and his money. The dinner ended abruptly after that. The gingerbread remained untouched. Emily, usually quick with a retort, was strangely silent. Her face pale, I felt a visceral wave of nausea. All my life, I had tried to be the perfect daughter, sacrificing my own desires for his expectations, believing that one day he would finally see me, truly see me, and give me the unconditional love I craved. And now, this utterly callous, manipulative ultimatum. Later that night, Emily came to my room. She knocked softly, then pushed the door open. Her eyes red-rimmed. Sarah, she choked out, her voice breaking. Can you believe him? How could he do this to us? I pulled her into a tight hug, my own anger simmering beneath the surface. I can believe it, Em, I admitted, my voice flat. This is classic Dad. He always finds a new way to pull the strings. We sat on my bed, the festive decorations around us seeming to mock our despair. What are we supposed to do? Emily asked, her voice tinged with a raw vulnerability I rarely saw. Are we actually supposed to compete for his money, like we're dogs fighting over scraps? The thought of it turned my stomach, the idea of competing with my sister, my lifelong confidant, for a father's love that should have been freely given, was grotesque. All the old childhood resentments, subtly fostered by Dad, threatened to resurface. The times he praised my grades over Emily's artistic talents, the times he criticized Emily's choices, implicitly praising mine. He had always been subtly pitting us against each other, always comparing, always rating. This was just the ultimate, overt escalation. No, I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. Absolutely not. We are not playing his game. Emily looked up, her eyes wide. Then what do we do? He's got all the power. He controls everything, the money, the family company, everything. He thinks he does, I countered, a dangerous glint in my eye. He thinks he can use his money to break us, to make us turn on each other, but he underestimates us. Emily, he underestimates us together. We talked late into the night. We revisited childhood memories, the quiet moments of solidarity we'd shared when Dad was being particularly demanding, the times Emily had snuck me snacks when I was studying late. Stressed about exams, the times I had defended her artistic choices to Dad, albeit weakly. We realized how much his tactics had already affected us, subtly eroding our trust, pushing us apart, making us feel like we were constantly on trial. Remember when I wanted to go to art school, Emily recalled, a bitter laugh escaping her. He basically threatened to cut me off, said it wasn't a serious career. You went into law because he wanted you to, didn't you, Sarah? I flinched. He heavily encouraged it. Yes, said it was the only respectable path, that it would give me security. But I thought it would make him proud, make him love me more. The admission felt raw, exposing a deep, unhealed wound. And did it? Emily asked softly. I looked down at my hands. For a while, I thought so, but it was never enough. Was it? There was always another hoop, another expectation. And now, this. The revelation. The shared understanding of our individual struggles under Dad's tyrannical love forged a new kind of bond between us, a bond of shared trauma, but also of shared defiance. We weren't rivals, we were allies. We were two birds, trapped in different parts of the same gilded cage. And now we had a common enemy, the cage itself, and the man who held the key. We have to beat him at his own game, Emily declared, her eyes now burning with a fierce determination. But not by playing by his rules. Exactly, I said, a plan slowly beginning to form in my mind, audacious and utterly thrilling. He wants to see who's worthy of his money. We'll show him what true worth looks like. And it won't be about who he picks. It'll be about what we choose. The initial shock of Dad's cruel ultimatum had faded, replaced by a cold, calculated anger. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about reclaiming our autonomy, our dignity, and proving to our father and to ourselves that our value wasn't determined by a line in his will. He thought he had created a wedge between us. He had actually forged a weapon, and he had no idea what my sister and I were about to do next. The Christmas tree lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across my bedroom wall. Emily and I sat cross-legged on my rug, a half-empty box of tissues between us. The initial shock from Dad's ultimatum had morphed into a simmering anger, but it was an anger that, surprisingly, felt unifying. I can't believe he actually said that, Emily whispered, picking at a loose thread on the rug. He really thinks he can just dangle his money over our heads like that. He always has. I replied, the bitterness in my voice raw, just usually not so overtly. Remember when I was applying to colleges, I wanted to go to State U for their journalism program. You know, actually write something that mattered. I let out a humorless laugh. He sat me down with a folder full of brochures for Ivy League law schools, told me journalism was a frivolous hobby, and that a law degree was the only sensible path to financial security and respectability. He even said he'd pay for my tuition, but only for law school. If I went into journalism, I'd be on my own. Emily nodded, her eyes distant. Yeah, I remember. And then when I wanted to go to art school, he pulled the same thing, said my scribbles wouldn't make me a living, that I needed to study something practical. He even tried to force me to take business classes, like my art was just a phase, like my passion meant nothing. We fell silent, the weight of those memories pressing down on us. For years, we had both, in our own ways, been performing for Dad, I, the dutiful daughter, always striving for the next achievement, the next promotion, hoping that one day he would finally look at me and say, Sarah, I'm proud of you, simply because you are you. Emily, the defiant one, rebelling against his every dictate, perhaps hoping her rebellion would force him to truly see her, to engage with her on her terms, to accept her for who she was, tattoos and all, but his love, his approval, always felt conditional, always tied to some performance, some expectation. It's not just about the money, is it? Emily murmured, breaking the silence. It's about everything. It's always been about him controlling us, our choices, our lives. Exactly, I said, a wave of clarity washing over me. He wants to see us fight. He wants us to tear each other down, to prove who's worthier of his inheritance. It reinforces his power, his belief that he's the ultimate arbiter of our lives. If you've ever been in a situation where you feel like a pawn in someone else's game, you know this feeling, this moment of pure, unadulterated realization that you are being manipulated and that your emotional well-being is being used as leverage. It's infuriating, but it's also incredibly clarifying. "So, we don't play," Emily declared, her jaw set. "But how he's literally holding our financial future hostage." "That's what he thinks," I countered, my mind already racing. "He thinks his money is our only path to security. But what if we found another path? One that he can't control. One that shows him his money isn't everything." We began to brainstorm, tentatively at first. Then with increasing fervor, we talked about how Dad had always belittled Emily's artistic ventures, always pushed me towards safe corporate careers. He saw art as frivolous, and anything outside of his direct influence as risky or unworthy. His will, this challenge, was just another extension of that mindset. He wanted to force us into a specific mold, and then reward the one who best fit it. "He wants us to be dependent," Emily mused, "always looking to him for approval, for financial support, and for a lifetime of competing with each other," I added. "He'd love nothing more than for us to be constantly vying for his favor, even after he's gone. It's his way of ensuring his control endures." The more we talked, the more layers of his manipulation we uncovered. Our childhoods, once viewed through a nostalgic haze, now looked starkly different. The expensive gifts that came with thinly veiled expectations, the forced family vacations where every activity was Dad's choice, the way he would subtly praise one of us in front of the other, creating unspoken rivalries. It was a pattern, a carefully woven web of control. And his will was merely the final, most audacious thread. "Do you think David knew this was coming?" Emily asked suddenly. I considered my brother, David, always the easygoing one, had always found ways to avoid direct conflict with Dad. He excelled in sports, which Dad approved of, and pursued a relatively uncontroversial career in tech. But he had fled to the West Coast the moment he could. "He probably suspected," I said slowly. "He always had a knack for sensing Dad's moods, for predicting his next move. He just chose a different way out. He detached. We recognized that detaching wasn't our only option. We could choose to fight, but not each other. We could fight for each other, for our own autonomy." The next few weeks were tense. Dad, for his part, acted as if nothing had happened, occasionally making veiled comments about sound financial planning or making wise life choices, directed pointedly at one of us. He probably expected us to start subtly sabotaging each other, to try and curry favor with him. He expected desperation. He expected competition. Instead, Emily and I began meeting in secret, at coffee shops away from our usual haunts, in my small downtown apartment that Dad considered quaint meaning, not a mansion, and sometimes just on long walks in the park. Bundled against the winter chill, we discussed our dreams, the ones we'd pushed aside to try and please him. Emily talked about expanding her design studio, taking on bigger, more impactful projects. She wanted to use her art for social good, to create campaigns for nonprofits, to design visual identities for ethical businesses. It was a beautiful vision, far removed from the commercial art Dad thought she should pursue. I, in turn, confessed my disillusionment with corporate law, the endless billable hours, the cutthroat environment, the constant feeling that I was using my intelligence to serve the corporate interests, not human ones. My dream had always been to advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves, to use legal strategy for social justice, perhaps in nonprofit law or civil rights. It felt naive, almost childish, compared to the serious career Dad had pushed me into. "So, what do we do?" Sarah, Emily finally asked during one of our clandestine meetings. "We can't just ignore him. He'll disinherit both of us if we don't play along, even a little." "We don't ignore him," I clarified. "We acknowledge his challenge. We just reinterpret it. We show him we're worthy, not by competing for his money, but by showing him that we don't need his money to be worthy. We show him that our worth comes from within, and from our bond as sisters." The more we discussed it, the more audacious our plan became. It started forming in the space between our shared frustrations and our rekindled sisterly love. We realized that the real inheritance wasn't his money. It was the opportunity to break free from his control, and to do it together. We decided that before making any grand moves, We needed to understand the full scope of what Dad had, and what his will truly meant. He had a reputation for being shrewd, for setting up complex legal structures. He wouldn't make it easy. We needed an expert. "I know a lawyer," I said to Emily one evening, "a retired family lawyer who used to handle some of Mom's personal affairs before she passed. Ms. Albright. She's sharp, ethical, and more importantly, she knows Dad's business dealings inside and out. She might even know details about his current will structure." Meeting Miss Albright was a revelation. She was a formidable woman in her late 70s, with piercing blue eyes and a mind sharper than any young associate I knew. We explained the situation, omitting no details of Dad's Christmas Eve bombshell. She listened patiently, occasionally nodding, a knowing look on her face. "Arthur Vance," she mused, leaning back in her plush armchair in her elegant, old-fashioned office. "He was always a man who liked to control everything and everyone around him. Your mother, bless her heart. She tried her best to soften his edges. Without her, I'm not surprised he's resorted to such tactics." "So, this only one daughter thing, is it legal?" Emily asked, cutting to the chase. Miss Albright nodded. "Oh, perfectly legal. He has the right to dispose of his assets as he sees fit. He can put any conditions he wants, as long as they're not overtly illegal or against public policy. Pitting his children against each other for a share of his fortune, morally reprehensible. Perhaps, but legally sound. It's a classic tactic of controlling patriarchs. Do you know anything about his current will?" I asked, feeling a knot of dread in my stomach. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Arthur has indeed updated his will several times since your mother's passing. The last version I saw, which was about a year ago, was quite specific. It left the bulk of his estate to a trust, with very particular conditions for distribution, and yes, it did contain language that allowed him to name a sole beneficiary among his children, based on his subjective judgment of their suitability or adherence to family values. It's a truly awful piece of work, designed for maximum leverage. So, he could literally disinherit both of us if he wanted to?" Emily asked, her voice small. "He could," Ms. Albright confirmed. "Or he could leave everything to a charity, or even to a distant relative he barely knows. If he so chose, the point, for Arthur, is not necessarily who gets the money, it's the power he wields in deciding. It's about making you jump through hoops, about keeping you on a leash." That hit home. It wasn't about fairness or even love. It was purely about control. Ms. Albright then offered some practical advice. "You could try to contest the will on grounds of undue influence or mental capacity," she began. "But given Arthur's meticulous nature and his team of expensive lawyers, it would be a long, expensive, and likely futile battle, and it would publicly drag your family name through the mud. We don't want his money if it means sacrificing our dignity or our relationship," I stated firmly. Glancing at Emily, she nodded in agreement. "Then you have two choices," Ms. Albright said, her gaze steady. "You can play his game, however reluctantly, and hope to win the inheritance, or you can choose to walk away, to redefine what winning means for yourselves, to establish your independence so completely that his money, or lack thereof, holds no power over you." Her words resonated deeply. We had already discussed this, but hearing it from an experienced professional solidified our resolve. We were tired of playing his game. We were tired of his control. "What if we chose a third option, Mrs. Albright?" Emily interjected, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "What if we didn't play his game, but we also didn't just walk away? What if we made a statement?" Ms. Albright leaned forward, a rare smile touching her lips. "Now that sounds interesting. Tell me more." We spent the rest of the afternoon outlining our nascent plan, refining it with Ms. Albright's legal insights. It was a risky strategy, unconventional, and guaranteed to infuriate Dad. But it was ours. It was a plan born not of malice, but of a fierce desire for self-preservation and, more importantly, a celebration of our sisterly bond. We would not let him divide us. We would not let him define our worth. He thought he had left us with an impossible choice. He never expected us to make no choice at all, and instead, choose each other. The competition was on, but it was a competition he wasn't invited to. Understanding Dad's manipulative patterns was one thing, but truly unraveling why he was this way, and how deep his need for control ran, felt like digging for buried treasure in a minefield. After our meeting with Ms. Albright, Emily and I were more united than ever. We had faced the chilling reality Dad was legally within his rights to play this cruel game. But knowing that didn't make us want to play it. Instead, it fueled our determination to find a third option, an option that didn't involve us tearing each other apart for his approval. He's always been obsessed with legacy, with the Vance name, I mused to Emily one afternoon. As we pored over old family albums at my apartment, we were looking for clues, for anything that could explain the origin of his controlling nature. But where did it come from? Our grandparents weren't like this, were they? Emily shook her head, flipping past a faded photo of our paternal grandmother, a warm, smiling woman. No, Grandma Rose was the kindest person. Grandpa George, too. They ran a small hardware store, nothing like Dad's empire. He built all this himself. That was it. Dad was a self-made man, undeniably brilliant in business, who had climbed from humble beginnings to immense wealth. He often boasted about his rags-to-riches story, emphasizing how he had earned everything. But with that ambition came an almost pathological need for control. He believed that because he had built his empire from nothing, he alone knew how to best manage it, and by extension, manage the lives of those connected to it. We started looking at old articles about his business ventures. We found stories about aggressive takeovers, ruthless negotiations, and instances where he had cut ties with longtime partners over minor disagreements. There was one particularly scathing article from a local paper from decades ago, detailing a lawsuit where Dad had strong-armed an elderly couple out of their land to expand one of his early developments. The article painted him as a cunning, relentless businessman, admired for his acumen, but feared for his lack of empathy. "He doesn't just do this with us," Emily said, tapping the article. "He does it with everyone. It's not about love or even loyalty. It's about winning, about power, and about proving he's always right," I added. "He sees anyone who deviates from his plan as a threat, as someone who needs to be brought back in line, and money is his ultimate leverage." This deep dive into Dad's past was unsettling, yet incredibly illuminating. We realized that his behavior wasn't a personal attack on us, or a reflection of our inherent inadequacy. It was a deeply ingrained pattern, a coping mechanism, perhaps, for a man who had clawed his way to the top and now feared losing control. He viewed relationships, even with his own daughters, through a transactional lens. Our worth was determined by our utility to his vision, our obedience to his will. "Remember how he always compared us?" Emily asked, flipping to a page with a photo of us as little girls, me meticulously coloring inside the lines. Emily's crayon strokes wild and vibrant. Going off the page, he'd look at your perfect drawing and then mine, and just shake his head at me, never said anything outright. But the message was clear. Sarah is the sensible one. Emily is a handful. And he'd tell me I needed to manage you, I confessed. Remembering the subtle burden of being the responsible older sister, he'd say, "Keep an eye on your sister, Sarah. She needs a good influence." Like it was my job to make sure you conform to his expectations. These subtle, insidious forms of manipulation had shaped our entire lives, creating a silent competition that we had both internalized. I, striving for his approval, and Emily, rebelling against his rigid definitions. The will, with its only one daughter clause, was simply the culmination of a lifetime of these tactics, designed to force us into a final, definitive battle for his favor, to further understand the legal landscape, and to gather more intelligence on Dad's specific financial structures. Ms. Albright suggested we discreetly look into the Vance family trust. This was the primary vehicle through which Dad controlled the majority of his assets, and likely, the mechanism through which his will would be executed. "The Vance family trust is quite complex," Ms. Albright explained during our next meeting. "Arthur set it up years ago, with very specific provisions. It's designed to be ironclad, to prevent challenges, and to ensure his vision is carried out long after he's gone. He calls it bulletproof." "Are there any loopholes?" I asked, my lawyer brain instinctively searching for cracks in the facade. She smiled faintly. For someone as meticulous as Arthur, genuine loopholes are rare. However, understanding the trust structure, particularly its beneficiaries and successor trustees, is crucial. It often dictates how inheritance will flow, even more so than the will itself for significant assets. Getting information about the trust was challenging. It was private, protected by layers of legal formality, but leveraging my background in corporate law and Emily's surprising knack for creative information gathering, which involves some very clever social engineering and a deep dive into publicly available corporate filings, we began to piece together a clearer picture. We found that Dad was the sole grantor and primary trustee, with his longtime, fiercely loyal business partner, Mr. Henderson, named as the successor trustee. This meant Henderson would essentially take over Dad's control upon his death, upholding his wishes. David was listed as a potential beneficiary, but with vague conditions. As for Emily and me, our eligibility was explicitly tied to the terms of his will. It became clear that the trust was designed not just to manage wealth, but to maintain control from beyond the grave. It was Arthur Vance's ultimate instrument of power. He wants to make sure his money continues to control us, even when he's not around to give us the silent treatment, Emily observed, her voice tinged with a mix of awe and disgust. Exactly, I agreed. He's trying to bind us, to keep us chasing his approval forever. The inheritance isn't a gift, it's a leash. This realization solidified our shared resolve. We wouldn't be on that leash. We wouldn't spend our lives competing for crumbs of his affection or bowing to his financial dominance. Our plan began to take a more concrete shape, born from our shared understanding of Dad's psychological warfare and the legal structures he had put in place. We spent hours discussing our individual aspirations, the dreams we had stifled under Dad's influence. Emily, with her artistic vision, yearned to create a non-profit foundation that would provide art education and resources to underprivileged communities. Imagine, Sarah, she'd say, her eyes bright with passion. Kids who don't have access to art, who are told it's not practical or serious, getting to discover their creativity, giving them a voice. My own desires, long buried under corporate law briefs, resurfaced. I wanted to use my legal skills to fight for social justice, perhaps working with an organization that advocated for victims of corporate malfeasance, or protecting vulnerable communities from predatory real estate developers, the very kind of people my father had been. The irony wasn't lost on me. So what's the plan then, where Emily finally asked. Once we had thoroughly dissected Dad's past and present machinations, how do we show him we're not playing, without just getting cut off and having nothing? We don't get nothing, I said, a mischievous glint in my eye. We get our freedom, and we turn his game on its head. He wants a show, we'll give him one, but it won't be the one he expects. The essence of our plan was this: we would not compete for the inheritance. We would not beg for his favor. Instead, we would jointly and publicly decline his offer, but in a way that was so strategically powerful, so utterly unexpected, that it would completely disarm him. We wouldn't just say no, we would say no, and this is what we will do instead. The what we will do instead part was crucial. We decided that we would co-found a non-profit organization together. Emily would lead the creative and outreach side, bringing her artistic vision to life, developing programs, and connecting with communities. I would handle the legal, financial, and strategic operations, leveraging my corporate background for a cause I truly believed in. This organization wouldn't just be a symbolic gesture. It would be a real, impactful entity, built from the ground up by us, for causes we cared about. The beauty of this plan was multifaceted. It rejected his premise by collaborating. We refused to be pitted against each other. It redefined worth. We would demonstrate that our value lay not in inheriting wealth, but in creating positive change. It used our strengths, Emily's creativity, and my analytical skills, once dismissed or channeled into Dad's dictates, would now be harnessed for our own purpose. It was public. Our decision would be announced in a way that directly countered his public ultimatum, turning his manipulative move back on him. It was self-sufficient. We would seek our own funding, proving we didn't need his inheritance to achieve our goals. But what about funding? Emily asked, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Starting a non-profit takes capital. Sarah, we don't have his millions. No, I agreed. But we have our skills, our networks, and our story. We'll start small. With our own savings, we'll apply for grants. We'll leverage my knowledge of fundraising and Emily's ability to create compelling campaigns. And we'll tell our story, not just about Dad's ultimatum, but about why we chose this path instead. A story about choosing connection over competition, purpose over inheritance. It was a daunting task. Embarking on this path, it meant leaving behind my lucrative corporate law career, something I had worked tirelessly for, and venturing into the uncertain world of nonprofits. It meant Emily pushing her creative boundaries even further. It meant a significant financial risk for both of us. But the thought of it, the sheer audacity of it, was exhilarating. It felt right. It felt like freedom. We started immediately, working in secret, building the framework for our nonprofit. Emily designed a logo that was vibrant and hopeful. I drafted bylaws, researched grant opportunities, and outlined a fundraising strategy. We named our organization Sisterhood and Seedlings, a reflection of our bond and the idea of nurturing new growth and potential. The year of Dad's challenge began to tick by. He would occasionally make thinly veiled comments, fishing for information, trying to gauge if we were playing his game. So, Sarah, any big moves in your career lately, thinking about becoming a partner? Perhaps, or to Emily, still sketching those little doodles. Dear, perhaps it's time to consider something more stable. We would offer vague, non-committal answers, letting him believe whatever he wanted. He thought we were agonizing, competing, trying to win. He had no idea we were quietly building an entirely new foundation beneath his feet, a foundation that would not include him. The emotional labor of this period was immense. We had to constantly remind ourselves of our shared purpose, to not let any of Dad's subtle provocations sow discord. Our bond, once strained by years of his machinations, was now stronger than ever, forged in the fires of mutual defiance and shared dreams. We were ready for the confrontation, ready to unveil our answer to his cruel ultimatum. He had sought to divide us with his will. We were about to show him the unbreakable power of sisterhood, with the framework for Sisterhood and Seedlings firmly in place. The true work began. This wasn't just about refusing Dad's inheritance. It was about building something real, something meaningful, from the ground up, entirely on our own terms. Our initial discussions with Miss Albright had given us legal clarity, but the actual execution of our plan demanded every ounce of our skill, resilience, and newfound unity. The first major step was securing initial funding. Neither Emily nor I were wealthy, especially after I decided to quietly transition out of my corporate law firm. This was a calculated risk. I knew I couldn't realistically pursue social justice law while simultaneously working for a firm that often represented the very interests I wished to fight. It was a terrifying leap of faith, trading a stable, high-paying career for the uncertainty of a startup nonprofit. But the thought of freeing myself from Dad's indirect influence, of no longer being a corporate lawyer just because he wanted me to be, was liberating. "This is it, Em," I told Emily one evening, as we sat in my now sparsely furnished apartment. No more safety net, just us, and this dream. Emily, ever the pragmatist with a creative soul, squeezed my hand. Good, that's how we'll know it's real. No silver spoons, just sweat equity. She had already scaled back her design work, dedicating more time to Sisterhood and Seedlings. Our strategy for funding involved a combination of our personal savings, which weren't vast, but enough for initial legal fees and basic operational costs, grant applications, and a carefully cultivated network of contacts. My legal background proved invaluable in drafting compelling grant proposals, highlighting our mission, vision, and detailed project plans. Emily, with her graphic design expertise, created stunning visual presentations, brochures, and a powerful website that truly captured the heart of our mission, empowering underprivileged youth through arts and education. We decided to target smaller, local foundations first, organizations focused on community impact, rather than large national grants. This allowed us to refine our pitch, get feedback, and build a track record. Each rejection was a blow, a momentary flicker of doubt, but we picked each other up. It's a numbers game, Sarah, Emily would remind me. Just like Dad's real estate deals, but for a good cause. We even held a small private fundraising event at a local community center, inviting friends, former colleagues, and anyone who had expressed interest in our vision. It was a far cry from Dad's opulent galas, but it was filled with genuine warmth and support. We shared our story, carefully omitting the more volatile details of Dad's will, but focusing on our shared belief in the transformative power of art and education. We talked about how many talented kids were overlooked because of their zip code, how many bright minds were stifled because they couldn't afford a paintbrush or a tutor. It resonated deeply. We raised a modest sum, but it was enough to keep us going, a validation that our mission had traction while we were building our foundation. The year of challenge Dad had imposed continued to tick by. He would occasionally call, fishing for information. So, Sarah, any big cases lately? Still thinking about making partner, he was probing, trying to see if I was still on his predetermined path. I'd give vague answers, focusing on the exciting new projects I was pursuing, without revealing their true nature. He tried to pit us against each other, too. Emily, your sister's firm just closed a major deal. She's really moving up. Are you still dabbling in design? He'd ask, his tone dripping with thinly veiled disapproval. Emily, to her credit, had mastered the art of the polite deflection. Oh, Dad, Sarah's doing amazing things, as always. And yes, my dabbling is actually turning into some really impactful work. You'd be surprised what a little creativity can do. She'd smile sweetly, leaving him with nothing concrete to grasp onto, just a vague sense that we weren't playing his game. The emotional toll of constantly navigating Dad's manipulations was exhausting. There were days I wanted to scream, to just lay out all his hypocrisies and emotional blackmail. But we knew that giving him that reaction was exactly what he wanted. He thrived on drama, on control. Our quiet defiance, our united front, was far more unsettling to him than any outright fight. We also knew that the true power of our countermove lay in its unexpected nature. Dad expected us to be desperate, to be competitive. He expected us to be dependent on his money. We were going to show him a level of independence he couldn't comprehend. The name Sisterhood and Seedlings itself held a powerful meaning for us. Sisterhood represented our unbreakable bond, forged in defiance of his attempts to divide us. Seedlings symbolized the new growth we hoped to nurture in young lives, and also our own new beginnings, growing from the seeds of our dreams. As the months passed, our nonprofit started to gain real momentum. Emily's artistic direction was truly inspiring. She designed immersive art workshops for children in underserved communities, creating vibrant, imaginative spaces where kids could express themselves freely. I worked tirelessly on the administrative side, building robust financial systems, securing legal protections, and networking with potential partners. We started small, running programs in local community centers and after-school clubs. The joy we saw on the faces of the children, the pure, unadulterated creativity that blossomed in our workshops, was more fulfilling than any corporate bonus or legal victory I had ever achieved. It was during this period of intense work and profound personal growth that I truly understood the depth of my father's toxicity. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the emotional gaslighting he had inflicted on us our entire lives. The way he made us doubt our choices, our abilities, our very worth, unless it aligned perfectly with his vision. The way he made us feel perpetually inadequate, always striving for an unreachable standard. One evening, after a particularly rewarding day running a workshop where a shy young girl, who had never held a paintbrush before, created a stunning abstract piece, Emily and I were having dinner. "You know," Emily said, stirring her soup, "I used to think there was something wrong with me, because I didn't want to be like Dad, because I didn't care about money the way he did. He made me feel like I was ungrateful, a failure, just because my dreams were different." "Me too." I admitted, "I used to think if I just worked harder, if I was just perfect enough, he'd finally see me. He'd finally give me that unconditional love. But it was never about us, was it? It was always about his need to control and to feel important," Emily added. "Like his approval was the greatest prize in the world." We laughed. a bittersweet laugh of shared understanding and liberation. We were finally free from that invisible burden, that constant need to seek his validation. Our worth was now self-defined, built on the impact we were making, the joy we were creating, and the strength of our own bond. The deadline for Dad's challenge was fast approaching. He had invited us to what he called a family review, a formal meeting at his lawyer's office. This was clearly going to be the grand reveal, the moment he would declare his chosen daughter, or perhaps, in his twisted mind, enjoy our collective desperation. We prepared meticulously for this meeting, not in terms of what we would say to win him over, but how we would deliver our unified message. We wanted it to be impactful, clear, and leave no room for doubt about our resolve. Ms. Albright had advised us on the legal implications of our choice, ensuring we understood the full financial consequences of our actions. We knew that walking away from Dad's will meant walking away from a significant inheritance, a fortune that could have set us up for life. But by now, that inheritance felt like a poisoned chalice. It was a symbol of his control, and we were done being controlled. Emily designed a special presentation for the meeting, not a business pitch, but a visual story of sisterhood and seedlings, showcasing the work we had already done, the lives we had touched. It was a testament to our chosen path, a direct counter-narrative to his obsession with material wealth and individual competition. The night before the family review, Emily stayed at my apartment. We talked for hours, revisiting every detail of our plan, steeling ourselves for the inevitable confrontation. "Are you nervous?" Emily asked, tucked into the guest bed. "Terrified," I admitted, standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. "But also exhilarated. This is it. No turning back. We're choosing ourselves. We're choosing us. And we're choosing our own legacy," Emily added softly. Not his. That sentiment resonated deeply. For so long, we had been defined by his legacy, by his expectations. Now, we were creating our own. We were breaking the cycle, severing the ties of manipulation that had bound our family for generations. The true inheritance wasn't money, it was freedom, and we were ready to claim it. The air in Mr. Davies's office, Dad's longtime lawyer, was thick with the scent of old leather and an unspoken tension. It was the same office where I'd signed countless corporate documents, where Dad had brought me for important meetings about my future, always subtly reminding me of his influence. Today, however, felt different. Emily and I sat side by side, dressed professionally but distinctly, a united front. Across the polished mahogany table sat Dad, looking supremely self-satisfied, and Mr. Davies, whose expression was, as always, meticulously neutral. Dad cleared his throat, a theatrical gesture that always preceded a pronouncement. "Girls," he began, his voice laced with the false geniality he reserved for public performances. "Thank you for coming. As you know, the year of my challenge is almost complete. And I've made my decision regarding my will." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, clearly expecting us to squirm, to look eager or anxious. But we didn't. We simply met his gaze, calm and collected. My heart was pounding, a drumbeat of defiance, but my expression gave nothing away. Emily, next to me, had a quiet strength radiating from her, a subtle smirk playing on her lips that only I could detect. "Before you make any announcements, Dad," I began, my voice clear and steady, cutting through his manufactured suspense. "Emily and I have something we'd like to present to you. It's our answer to your challenge." Dad's self-satisfied smile faltered slightly. Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his usually impassive eyes. Emily pulled out her tablet and, with a confident flick of her wrist, connected it to the large monitor on the wall. "We decided," Emily picked up, her voice firm and articulate, "that instead of competing for your inheritance, we would create our own legacy." The screen lit up with the vibrant, hopeful logo of Sisterhood and Seedlings. Dad's brow furrowed in confusion. He clearly hadn't expected this. I took over, my voice gaining momentum. "For the past year, while you've been watching to see which one of us would prove worthy of your money, Emily and I have been building something truly meaningful. We've co-founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing art education and resources to underprivileged youth. Emily clicked to the next slide, showcasing stunning photographs of children in our workshops, eyes wide with wonder as they painted, laughing as they molded clay, proudly holding up their creations. My words flowed easily, detailing our mission, our programs, and the impact we were already making in the community. We believe that every child deserves the opportunity to express themselves, to find their voice, regardless of their financial background. We believe in nurturing creativity, critical thinking, and empathy. Dad was listening, but his face was contorting, a mixture of disbelief and growing fury. He probably thought this was a pathetic attempt to guilt-trip him, a naive venture. We've secured initial funding, Emily added, clicking to a slide showing our modest but growing donor list and grant awards. And we've partnered with several community centers and schools. We're building something sustainable, something that will genuinely change lives. Then came my core message. And so, Dad, our answer to your question of who will be in your will is this: neither of us will. The words landed like a bombshell. Dad literally gasped. A guttural, shocked sound. Mr. Davies, for the first time, looked genuinely stunned, his pen freezing midair. We are officially, and publicly, declining any and all inheritance from your will. I continued, looking directly into Dad's wide, furious eyes. And we are doing so together, as sisters. We refuse to be pitted against each other. We refuse to let your money, or your approval, define our worth or dictate our relationship. Emily clicked to the final slide, a powerful image of two intertwined tree roots, growing strong and deep underneath. A simple, bold statement. Our worth is not inherited, it is built. What is this nonsense? Dad finally spluttered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. You're refusing? Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Years of my hard work? My legacy. It's precisely because we understand what your legacy truly represents, Dad, that we're making this choice, Emily shot back, her voice unwavering. Your legacy, to us, has become a tool of manipulation, a way to control us, to keep us forever striving for something you never truly offered: unconditional love and acceptance. You want us to compete for crumbs of your affection, for a conditional inheritance, just so you can feel powerful, I added, the years of suppressed frustration pouring into my voice, but controlled, precise. Well, we're not playing that game anymore. We're choosing to build our own legacy, one rooted in purpose, not profit, in connection, not control. Dad slammed his fist on the table, rattling the crystal water glasses. This is an outrage, you ungrateful. Spoiled children. I gave you everything. I paid for your education. I gave you opportunities. You gave us conditional support. Dad, I corrected him, my voice calm, always with a price tag attached. You controlled our career choices, judged our every decision, and undermined our self-worth. You tried to buy our obedience, our conformity. You didn't give us freedom. You tried to put us in a gilded cage. And the ultimate insult, Emily interjected, was pitting us against each other, your own daughters, over your will. You thought you could break our bond, make us fight instead. You made us realize that our sisterhood is worth more than any amount of money you could ever leave us. Dad was speechless, his jaw working furiously. He looked at us, two women standing unified and defiant. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes that wasn't anger or control. It was shock, pure, unadulterated shock, mixed with a hint of genuine bewilderment. He had truly never expected this. His carefully laid plans, his ultimate power play, had utterly backfired. This is insane, he finally roared, regaining some of his bluster. You'll regret this. You'll have nothing. Do you think you can build a non-profit on thin air? You'll come crawling back? We won't. Dad, I said firmly, we're not coming back. Our journey began the moment you told us only one of us could be in your will. You gave us the push we needed to find our own strength, our own purpose, and we found it in each other. And in this mission, Emily pulled out two official-looking documents. These are notarized statements, Dad, she explained, her voice steady, formally declining any future inheritance from you, or the Vance Family Trust. We'll be sending copies to Mr. Davies, She slid the papers across the table. Dad stared at them, his face a mask of utter defeat. The realization that he had not only failed to divide us, but had actively pushed us away, seemed to hit him with the force of a physical blow. His scheme to exert control from beyond the grave had collapsed, not because we fought it, but because we simply walked away, choosing a path he could neither comprehend nor influence. The meeting ended abruptly after that. Dad was too stunned, too furious, to continue. We gathered our things, thanked Mr. Davies, who seemed to offer a subtle, respectful nod, and walked out of that office, leaving Dad alone with his shattered expectations and the echoing silence of his failed manipulation. Walking out into the bustling city street, Emily and I exchanged a look, and then we simply started laughing. Not a mean-spirited laugh, but one of pure, unadulterated liberation. It was a laugh of relief, of triumph, of having finally, irrevocably, cut the strings that had bound us for so long. "We did it, Em," I breathed, my heart light. "We did it, Sarah," she replied, throwing her arm around my shoulder. "We really did it." The immediate consequence of our action was profound, and for Dad, unforeseen. His attempt to create a competition had instead created a public spectacle of his own manipulative nature. News of our defiance, albeit initially vague, began to circulate through family, friends, and ultimately the local society pages. It wasn't about the money, but about the principle. The wealthy patriarch whose daughters had publicly disavowed his inheritance and chosen a path of self-made purpose. The backlash for Dad wasn't just emotional. His carefully cultivated image as a generous, albeit demanding, family man took a hit. Some of his business associates, who had long resented his ruthless tactics, saw this as an opportunity. Whispers about his coldness and control grew louder. His power, once absolute within his family, had been openly challenged and defied. The control he so desperately craved had slipped through his fingers, leaving him isolated and bewildered. And for us, the consequence was freedom, not just from his will, but from his constant judgment, his suffocating expectations. We had chosen our relationship, our purpose, over his money, and in that choice, we had found something far more valuable than any inheritance. We had found ourselves. The battle was over, and we had won. Not by taking a prize, but by refusing to play the game entirely. The family review meeting had shattered the fragile illusion of control my father had meticulously maintained. In the immediate aftermath, there was a strange, unsettling quiet from his end. No furious phone calls, no blistering emails, just silence. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a testament to how utterly blindsided he had been. He had expected a fight, a desperate plea for validation, or at least a bitter concession from one of us. He never anticipated our united, calm, and absolute refusal. For Emily and me, the emotional shift was palpable. The decades of internalized pressure, the subconscious need for his approval, lifted like a heavy fog. We felt a lightness, a freedom that was far more intoxicating than any inheritance. We had chosen ourselves, and we had chosen each other. That was the real prize. News travels fast in small, interconnected circles, especially when it involves prominent families and shattered expectations. While our formal refusal of the inheritance wasn't public in the sense of a press release, it rippled through our social circles. Family friends, who had always witnessed Dad's controlling nature but never dared to challenge it, started whispering. His business associates, some of whom had quietly suffered under his domineering tactics for years, began to eye him with new skepticism. His carefully constructed image as the benevolent patriarch, the wise and generous provider, cracked under the weight of our defiance. This was an unforeseen consequence for Dad. He thrived on public perception, on being seen as infallible. Our actions had exposed his manipulative core, not just to us, but to a wider audience. He became, for a time, a topic of hushed gossip and thinly veiled pity from those who once envied his power. The irony was bitter. He had sought to control our lives, even after his death, and in doing so, he had lost the control he valued most, his reputation and his unchallenged authority. Meanwhile, sisterhood and seedlings blossomed, freed from the burden of Dad's judgment. Emily and I poured our hearts and souls into the nonprofit. The initial funds from our personal savings and the small fundraiser allowed us to secure a modest office space in a vibrant, community-focused neighborhood. Emily designed a cheerful, inviting interior filled with colorful art supplies and children's drawings. It became a haven, a place where creativity flourished. I leveraged my legal expertise, not for corporate mergers, but for securing official nonprofit status, drafting meticulous agreements with schools and community centers, and ensuring every penny was accounted for with transparent financial systems. My corporate background, once a tool for Dad's ambitions, was now a powerful engine for social good. I found an unexpected joy in grant writing, turning complex legal language into compelling narratives that articulated our mission and impact. Our first major program was a series of after-school art workshops for elementary students in a disadvantaged area. The kids were initially shy, some never having had access to proper art materials. But under Emily's patient, inspiring guidance, they opened up. They painted vibrant murals, sculpted imaginative creatures, and wrote powerful poems. Seeing their faces light up with pride, witnessing their confidence grow with each stroke of a paintbrush, was more rewarding than any bonus check I'd ever received. This, Emily said to me one afternoon, watching a group of children excitedly show off their work. This is what real legacy looks like, Sarah, not vaults of money, but changed lives. I nodded, a lump in my throat. We were building something far more enduring than Dad's real estate empire. We were building hope, opportunity, and self-worth in young minds. Our story, the one we had carefully crafted for our grant applications and fundraising pitches, gained traction. We didn't explicitly detail Dad's will, but we spoke of overcoming familial challenges, of choosing purpose over material gain, and of the unbreakable bond between sisters. This resonated deeply with individual donors and foundations alike. Our transparency, our passion, and our tangible results spoke for themselves. Within a year, Sisterhood and Seedlings had grown significantly, allowing us to expand our programs to more schools and even hire a small, dedicated staff. We continued to maintain a polite, yet firm, distance from Dad. He would occasionally try to reach out, usually through vague, non-committal messages, perhaps sensing the growing positive buzz around our nonprofit. He never apologized, never acknowledged the cruelty of his ultimatum, but his attempts to re-engage felt less like a power play and more like a bewildered curiosity, perhaps even a hint of regret, though he would never admit it. One day, I received an unexpected call from David, my brother. He had been quietly following our work from afar. "Sarah," he said, his voice hesitant, "I've been seeing what you and Emily are doing. It's incredible." "Thanks, David," I replied, a cautious optimism in my voice. Our last conversation had been brief and strained. "No, seriously," he insisted. "I saw a piece on a local news channel about Sisterhood and Seedlings. The kids looked so happy, and you two, you looked genuinely happy, like truly yourselves." He paused, and I realized what Mom would have wanted, and what Dad, what he tried to take away from you. My heart softened. He tried to take away more than just money, David. He tried to take away our relationship, our freedom, our very sense of self. "I know," he sighed, the weariness in his voice palpable. He's not doing so well, Sarah, since that summit. And now with this news about your nonprofit, he's become even more isolated. His business isn't facing any immediate threats, but his reputation has taken a hit, and people, even his closest allies, are starting to keep their distance. He's lonely, a part of me. The part that had longed for his approval for so long, felt a pang of something akin to pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the profound gratitude for my own liberation. "That's his choice, David," I said gently. "He chose control over connection. He chose to try and divide his family for personal gain. We simply chose a different path." "You did," he agreed, "and it was the right one. For both of you, and honestly, for me too. Seeing you two stand up to him, it's inspiring. It made me realize I need to set my own boundaries. for my own peace. Our conversation was surprisingly cathartic. David wasn't seeking reconciliation for himself, but perhaps trying to understand, and even acknowledge, the validity of our choices. He was starting his own journey of untangling himself from Dad's web, a journey he hadn't had the courage to embark on before. Our legacy and true freedom. Years have passed since that Christmas Eve, and my life and Emily's are richer than any inheritance could have made them. Sisterhood in Seedlings is now a nationally recognized nonprofit, impacting thousands of children across multiple states. We've built partnerships with major educational institutions and received grants from philanthropists who believe in our mission. Emily's artistic vision continues to inspire, and my legal and strategic acumen keeps the organization growing and thriving. We've written books, given TED Talks, and become advocates for creative education. Our father, Arthur Vance, continues to live in his mansion, a solitary figure amidst his vast wealth. He's older now, perhaps a little more subdued. He never overtly acknowledged our success, never formally apologized for his actions, but sometimes, when a positive news story about sisterhood and seedlings breaks, we hear he's seen it, and in those moments, I imagine, he must grapple with the quiet, undeniable truth that his daughters, the ones he tried to control and divide with his will, ultimately built a legacy far more impactful and meaningful than anything he ever could have dictated. The true wealth we inherited was not his money, but the unbreakable bond of sisterhood that his cruelty inadvertently forged. It was the freedom to define our own success, to pursue our own passions, and to live lives aligned with our true values. It was the realization that our worth was inherent, not something to be earned through competition or financial compliance. My story, our story, is a testament to the power of setting boundaries, even with those who hold immense power over you. It's about recognizing emotional manipulation for what it is and choosing to walk away from toxic dynamics. It's about the incredible strength that can emerge when you reclaim your narrative and refuse to be defined by someone else's expectations. If you've ever felt like your family's love came with strings attached, or like you had to compete for affection or approval, know this: you are not alone. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Your happiness is not a prize to be won. It's a right to be claimed, and sometimes the most rebellious, empowering act you can take is simply to walk away from what diminishes you and build something beautiful and meaningful with the people who truly lift you up. So, if this story resonated with you, hit that like and subscribe button. Drop your own experiences in the comments below. How did you navigate family challenges and find your own path? And please, share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their freedom, their self-worth, is more valuable than any inheritance.